Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 3, Episode 6, Let the Angels Commit. Episode in a nutshell is a brief summary of what happened in the episode. As always, we'll start with the patients that were in the episode. So we first start with a woman coming in who has two uteruses and is pregnant in both uteruses. However, apparently she got pregnant at different times in both uteruses, which indicates that while her and her fiance were broken up briefly, that she slept with somebody else, and so one of the children is his and then the other is not. And then, of course, the stress of him temporarily leaving her leads to her going into premature labor on the older uterus child, which then has to be removed through C-section, while the other child remains in the second uterus. And then luckily there is a happy ending as the man does come back. Then we have a woman who purposefully burns her hand to try to get out of a test that she's failed 5 times, the bar test, and she's so afraid of being a failure that she'd rather harm herself than anything else, ultimately leading to her being taken up to the psych ward to get the help that she needs. And then the only other patient that we have is kind of a aside to another story, which of course is Christina is continuing to manage Burke's operations and schedules in order to hide the fact he has a tremor. She's the one who's been scrubbing in with him every time, and she books a very complicated surgery that very few people are able to do, Burke being one of them, a Humpty Dumpty surgery as it was called. But of course he has a tremor, so that's very dangerous with such a delicate operation, though it does benefit her because she gets to practice this operation, doing a lot of the work for him. However, it does have the side effect of hurting Bailey's feelings in a way. Because of what happened with Izzy, there are a lot of people who are questioning Bailey's competence as a doctor, and she sees the Humpty Dumpty, she sees that the resident slot is open, she puts her name down there in front of Christina. Christina then goes and erases her name, preventing her from being in the surgery with Burke because of what they're covering up and because she would notice, obviously, that it was suspicious that Christina was doing so much of the work. But after the surgery, Bailey goes to confront Burke, who wasn't aware of this happening, and he has to tell her, basically to cover for Christina and him, that it's because he couldn't use her, which highlights that other people are thinking that she's no longer as competent as she once was, at least in her mind, which is unfortunate all around. Then we have Derek's sister coming into town, not liking Meredith because of the fact that Derek had a relationship with her while he was still married and now is getting divorced, and she keeps referring to Meredith as the slutty intern, which Derek chastises her for, but she does it anyways, and she does get along very well with Addison and Mark, though she doesn't know the full story about how Addison and Mark had carried on an affair for months. But ultimately, when she leaves believing that Derek is in a good place, advising him to take time, which he then approaches Meredith, apologizes that he didn't call her after she told him that she broke up with Finn, but that he needs time to clear his head, but he still wants things to work with her. Meanwhile, Alex thinks he wants to be in plastics, thinks he wants to be on Sloane's service, but Sloane isn't really helping him with surgeries or teaching him anything, but is trying to have him run errands for him instead. Meanwhile, when the two uteruses come in, Alex basically inserts himself because he really did miss Addison's service. George tries to get back together with Callie, who basically tells him stop chasing her if he doesn't have any intention to catch her, and she understands what he's saying about wanting to be committed to her, but he's saying it a little too late because they've already broken up, and again, don't chase if you're not willing to catch. And then last but not least, I believe, is Izzy returning to work now. And of course, because of the situation that she ended up in, there are some legal ramifications that basically mean she's on a probation coming back, and she's got a bunch of rules to follow for the hospital. And then Bailey, who's her resident again, who didn't want to be her resident again, has also given her additional rules, including the fact that she is only to observe and that she's going to be shadowing her colleagues for the day, starting with Meredith, who does end up giving her a good review after the day of shadowing because she was the one who caught Gretchen, the woman who burned her hand, having done so on purpose. And she does get complimented by the chief on the way home. And at first she is resistant to shadowing, but then through her interactions with the patient, realizes that her shadowing and observing is like a safety net to catch her should she fall again and to make sure that she is okay to be continuing. And so by the end, she's come to terms with that. And that is our episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened, we will now rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, followed then by the personal ranking list. And we'll start with our single episode supporting character introductions. There was Gretchen, no last name is given, who is the woman who burned her hand because she's so afraid of failing an exam that she has failed 5 times, so it is fair that she would worry about failing again. Then we had Noelle Levette and Greg Stanton, who are the couple. Noelle is the one with 2 uteruses. Greg is the child of, or the parent of the child, the first child conceived, which is a boy, and then there was a little girl. Little girl was. So basically, what happened is Noelle and Greg were together. Noelle ended up pregnant. Greg then wanted to take responsibility and marry her. She panicked. They broke up briefly. While they were broken up, she slept with somebody else, which is fair because she was broken up at the time. And then, once she'd gotten over her initial panic about it, she then came back. They got engaged, planning to be married. However, Greg was not aware of the fact that she slept with someone else while they were broken up. And so when George and Addison come in and tell her that the babies have different due dates because they were conceived at different times, which is why one is larger than the other, it is revealed that the time frame of the daughter, is while they were broken up, which Greg has a hard time with because that means he's not the biological father, though of course that doesn't mean that they won't be father and child. Those types of relationships can be more than blood, so I don't really get why he was freaking out so much, but I guess it is a shock. And then Addison makes a comment also on how she's revealed her patient's infidelity. However, based on what I watched, it was stated that Noelle and him were broken up at the time for a certain amount of time. So I don't think that's infidelity, because if you're broken up, you're not committed to the other person. So it's fair. Now, some people, when they're like on a separation or on a break, maybe they think they shouldn't be sleeping with other people, but ultimately I don't think personally that that would be classed as infidelity, because if you are broken up, you are not committed nor exclusive at the time, therefore fair enough to sleep with somebody else. Though I never approve of one night stands either, so I'm not saying I approve, I'm just saying it's not technically infidelity, at least I wouldn't consider it to be. But ultimately, in the end, he does come to terms and realize that as the person who will be raising the daughter, she will be as much his child as the boy will be. And so when he comes back, he indicates this to Noelle and they have a happy moment. Then we have, so that's 3 points total, 1 for each character. Then the multi-episode supporting character introduction is Nancy Shepard, who is Derek's oldest sister. I believe she only recurs 1 other time in the series, but she does recur, therefore multi-episode, and she does come to Seattle to check on her brother on behalf of the entire family to make sure that he is fine and, hasn't blown up his life or self-destructed or whatever the case may be, and does leave with peace of mind in the end. Then we have 4 points for our multi-season main character development, which is Izzy going back to work. And then the main relationship development, also worth 4 points, which is Derek asking for some time to clear his head, but expressing that he does want to be with Meredith and he does want them to work out, and apologizing for not calling her, which is development in a positive direction for that relationship. And all told, that brings us to 13 points. Positive, however, there are a couple of negatives. First negative is the negative messaging or behavior, and this, of course, is the continued cover-up of Burke's injury instead of coming clean about it between Christina and Burke. But because I've taken points for that before, I'm not taking the points specifically for that. What I'm taking the points for this time is how this ruse of theirs is causing harm to those around them, specifically in this episode, Bailey being negatively impacted, Bailey being told by Richard that people are questioning her judgment because of Izzy. She then lashes out a bit at Izzy, basically hamstringing what she can and cannot do, really narrowing her ability to do her job and making her shadow other doctors, including Meredith in this episode. But then, like I said, there was the operating board issue where she puts her name down to be part of the Humpty Dumpty surgery. Christina erases it because, of course, her and Burke are lying and they have to cover it up. And then, of course, when Bailey confronts Burke, he then has to lie and basically say, not in so many words, but you're incompetent, I can't use you. He just says the I can't use you part, but we all know what the implication of that is, which of course then is a blow to her confidence. She believes then that he is not trusting her judgment and that she is being looked down on and that she's not being perceived as skilled. So basically, their lying hurts Bailey on an emotional level, I would say, in this episode. And that I think is worth the negative points. And then also the supporting relationship regression or breakup. Obviously, Callie and George are officially broken up, but George is continuing to try to pursue her. And with the end of this episode, having interacted with Noelle and Greg, he basically has decided that he did want to commit to Callie, but once again, she rejects him. She's open to him being committed, but rejects him, stating that he has to stop chasing her if he doesn't want to catch her. And then she goes off. So because it's still going up and down, and I believe they will at one point get back together, I am still going to be recording the steps of their relationship, which in this case is another rejection of George trying to get back together. Anyways, that leaves this episode as a 9 out of 10. And that brings our mostly objective ranking to, in first place, this episode, Let the Angels Commit, I Am a Tree, Time Has Come Today, Oh the Guilt, What I Am, and then in last so far, Sometimes a Fantasy. Now, as for my personal ranking, as I mentioned, I don't consider it infidelity if you are on a break or you have broken up, even if it's a temporary breakup, to sleep with somebody else. Because if you are not in a committed relationship, you are not beholden to only sleeping with a person that you're previously committed to. However, at the same time, if it was like the word that they used was that they had broken up after she got pregnant and he wanted to marry her and she was unreceptive to that idea. But if instead they used the wrong term and it was supposed to have been like, oh, they had a separation or a break, then maybe some communication should have been done between the two of them to determine whether or not sleeping around is something that they would experiment with in the break to see if they really want to be together or something like that. But at least when I was watching it, I believe they used the term they broke up, And therefore, if they were broken up briefly, even if it was only for a brief amount of time, if she slept with someone while they were broken up, that's not infidelity. And so I didn't really like that they had utilized that term. But also, it's a complicated situation because obviously, if you break up briefly and then you get back together fairly quickly, and the reason for the breakup is just like a fear of commitment, staying faithful would have probably been better. But at the same time, also, if they didn't have that communication, then you can't really complain that she decided to experiment to see if she wanted to be with somebody else before committing, as she was the one panicking about commitment. And I do feel if you are panicked about a commitment and you are broken up, then you might try casual and realize that's not for you and then go back to commitment. Either way, I question whether it can be called infidelity, is all I'm saying there. I do like that we got a little more progress on the dramas that are happening. Is he coming back to work finally? Because I feel like this show is actually pretty good at pushing on the drama, because so many times I'll get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm done with this storyline. Like, you need to wrap it up, or I'm going to be like, not interested. And then almost as soon as I say that in a video, one or two episodes later, they've wrapped it up. So they push right to the edge of it being like, okay, I'm done with this now. And they seem to know that exact line of where it's getting kind of redundant, and then they push it forward again. So I do think that that's very clever, but at the same time can be annoying. But either way, Izzy's back to work. She falls back into her overly empathetic character trait, um, but this time in a good way, and therefore gets a good review of it. Derek and Meredith confirm that they want to be together, but they're going to take some space. George wants to be with Callie, gets rejected. Christina and Burke, I don't approve of what they're doing. Obviously, I've said that before. And now it's starting to harm third parties like Bailey, so really don't approve of that. So that was a bit of a negative. However, also at the same time, it was entertaining drama because you're wondering when they're actually gonna get caught, when it's going to go wrong, because inevitably it has to at some point go wrong. And Alex, of course, because it's a rewatch, we do know that eventually he does go towards like the more pediatric side of medicine, and he was convinced he wanted to go plastics. Working with Sloan, major disappointment. So then he also comes back and ends up scrubbing into Addison's surgery, even though he doesn't get to be a part of the surgery because he's not on her service. He does scrub in, and he does end up actually helping in the surgery because he remembers how Greg calms down the daughter by talking about sports. And so when they're in the surgery and the female child starts moving, which puts the male child at risk, he then steps up and does a sports commentary, which calms her down, allowing the surgery to ultimately be successful. So overall, I really enjoyed the episode. Some things in it wasn't overly fond of, but overall found it entertaining. Found the drama is ramping up to be kind of reaching its climaxes in certain areas. And I did think that we got a good covering of all of the main characters and their current statuses and their current dramas. So I gave this episode an 8 out of 10 for those reasons. And that does put this episode also in first place for me personally. Let the Angels Commit. I am a tree, what I am, sometimes a fantasy. Time has come today, and then in sixth is Oh, the Guilt. Which brings us now to the series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking, Season 1 is in first place with 77.78%, Season 2 in second with 76.67%, and Season 3 so far has 30 out of a possible 230. On the personal ranking side, Season 2 is in first with 72.22%, Season 1 in second with 66.67%, and then Season 3 so far has a score of 39 out of a possible 230. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 3, Episode 6, Let the Angels Commit. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.